So back to our video on IVF facts and fiction, myths and misconceptions. So I get asked this quite often: should I do a pregnancy test at home or with a GP the day after my embryo transfer, just to see if it's worked? Well, the short answer to that is no, you should not. And here's why. When we prepare for an egg collection, about 34 to 36 hours before the actual retrieval time itself, we give an injection called a trigger injection, and that trigger injection matures the egg that is inside all the follicles. Now, generally the body does do this naturally, but because we've taken over the whole body's hormone sort of system, the body can't do it in an IVF setting, so we need to give that hormone. The hormone is absolutely needed for the eggs to mature and to also loosen from sticking to the egg, so we can actually collect it when we do the egg retrieval. Now, the body's natural hormone that does this is luteinizing hormone, or LH. We can't replace that in IVF, because if we were to use LH, or luteinizing hormone, to trigger as the body normally does, we would need a massive amount, and the LH that we have at the moment on market just doesn't last long enough or is potent enough, and we need to give huge amounts of it. So what we use instead is a chemical that functions like LH. It has a structure similar to LH, but it's more potent and it lasts for longer. We use that as a trigger, and that chemical is HCG. Now, that may sound a bit familiar, because HCG, yes, is the pregnancy hormone. It is the hormone that is produced by the placenta when we achieve a pregnancy. This is what pregnancy tests look for on the urine sticks and in the blood. And the trigger that we use, this HCG trigger, is really effective because it's very similar to LH. It lasts for much longer and is much more potent. So it lasts for about 7 to 10 days. So imagine if we do we do the trigger 2 days before your egg collection, and we do your egg collection we do your transfer, I should say, 5 days after the egg collection. In which case, there's still plenty of HCG, which is the trigger chemical, still floating around in your body. And when we do a pregnancy test fairly soon after an embryo transfer, we will pick up that HCG. So your pregnancy sticks at home will be positive. If you go to a GP and you do a blood test, it will come back as positive. So it's then we're essentially looking at something called a false positive. It gives false hope, and it makes any sort of actual pregnancies then hard to interpret. So if we have an HCG that is repeated, then it's hard to know whether this is just the trigger or this is an actual pregnancy. So the idea of waiting about 10 to 11 days after the embryo transfer to do a pregnancy test is because we know that's when the trigger that we give will no longer be in the system, and any HCG that we pick up in the body at that time should be an actual pregnancy. So doing an HCG level or a pregnancy test straight after an embryo transfer, or 1 or 2 days after an embryo transfer, is really not helpful, and it can get you false hopes that this has worked. Now, to muddy the picture even more, there are some clinicians, and they're not wrong in doing this, I just want to be clear, but there are some clinicians who, after the transfer, in addition to giving progesterone to support the lining, they also give HCG to support the lining. Now, this is a tried and tested method of supporting the lining. It works very well. The reason why we don't use it routinely is because it gives you a risk of hyperstimulation, and again, it muddies the picture, because if we give a trigger and then just before the transfer we get a shot of HCG again, and about 5 days after the transfer we give another shot of HCG, all to support the lining, then by about day 11, day 12, when you come, that is 11 to 10 days after the transfer, and you come to do the actual pregnancy test, that pregnancy test will be positive, but you're then not sure whether it's positive because the multiple shots of HCG that we've taken to support the luteal phase or the lining, or it's an actual pregnancy. So whenever we give HCG, whether it's Ovidrel or whether it's Pregnal or one of the other HCGs, whenever we give HCG, we have to realize we have to wait for those levels to die down before we can actually do an accurate pregnancy test. And that's why we have to wait to give an accurate answer.